Hello, my loves. Welcome to V for Vibrant. My name is Kellyanne, and I am hoping to get into the neurodivergent habit of reaching for clarity and reaching for resolution as quickly as possible. Because what I have seen, not only in my relationships, but with my clients, is that, and with myself, is neurodivergent here, is also that the certainty that we reach for is often a kind of self-betrayal. I know, it's hard to hear it. It's hard to hear already, just seconds into the video, that we're already betraying ourselves, and that the way that we've developed, the coping mechanisms that we've developed with confrontation and conflict have been bad, have been a way to essentially fool ourselves out of the anxiety that we feel, not knowing what's going on, not knowing how somebody else feels about us, especially if you have rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Also, hello. um, you might be very quick to try to get out of that "are you mad at me? They must be mad at me" impulse. And one of the ways that we do that, and that we get through that moment of like anxious attachment to an outcome and to a resolution, one of the ways that we get out of that, if we don't seek validation from others, like if we don't know the other side of the story, and we don't ask for the other side of the story, we're maybe afraid of the other side of the story, or the other person has hurt us so much that we just can't even imagine looking at their stupid freaking face, then what we do instead is we storytell. We tell ourselves stories in the void of information. And in the absence of the validation by those people or by the circumstances around us that's causing us this uncertainty and causing us this discomfort, what we're going to do is we're going to meet our discomfort with whatever kind of stories fit the evidence. And for neurodivergent people, we've been collecting evidence. And one of the things that we might tend to do is explore the depths of the stories that those pieces of evidence lead us to. And the harmful thing that happens, the self-betrayal that happens, is that those pieces of evidence might lead us to a false story. They inevitably will lead us to false stories, period. And yet, we keep doing it. We keep fooling ourselves, and we keep creating these false narratives to give us a false sense of security, a false sense of completion, a false sense of understanding, because we would rather make assumptions about what other people are going through than than approach what might be a painful truth, if things turn out to be worse than we actually fear they are. The self-betrayal comes in at the part where not only are you assuming that you don't have the capacity and you don't have the discomfort tolerance to be able to withstand the real truth and the whole truth once you incorporate both sides of the Venn diagram, my truth, your truth, our truth, that meeting point in the middle that helps us to understand where the neutral parts are and where the your parts are and my parts are. What you're doing is you're betraying yourself, because you're not only not believing that you have the capacity and the ability to tolerate that level of discomfort with finding out the truth. But also, you're building upon a self validation that sustains emotional immaturity. Because what happens when you are hurt so much by something that happens, maybe your boss says something that you interpret a certain way and you don't come back to validate that interpretation, or a member of your family um, says something to you that you've been wondering about yourself. And so you believe that to be validation, or you believe that to be like the end of the story, but there might be more to it. You're cutting yourself off at the knees, and you're betraying yourself by not getting the full story because of that fear of what's on the other side of your own discomfort. We need to be able to build discomfort and distress tolerance. Otherwise, what we're doing when we fool ourselves into these false stories is not only are we sustaining a pattern throughout our lives of letting go of relationships and letting go of jobs and letting go of situations and opportunities that hurt us only one time. It only takes one time, like one really big for us to run away, write a story about it, feel resolved, and move on. Been there before. But also, you're creating a pattern of that happening over and over again. You're not opening yourself to the possibility that there are people who could stay in your lives for a long time, or there are, jobs that could grow with you if you were to approach every story that you have, or maybe the collection of stories that you have. I don't know, maybe this happened, or maybe they got sick, or maybe this, maybe they, maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they really think this about me, or maybe they've always hated me, or maybe they never believed in me. All of these stories that you make up, not only are you perpetuating a pattern of resolving things without other people, like before they're actually resolved, but also you're harming yourself by the perpetuation of your own bad beliefs. And they're bad if they're unkind to you. They're bad if all you need is one piece of evidence or one example from another person or a couple of people in your life to show something to you that you feel uncomfortable about. All you need is for that to happen, for you to shut down. The emotional immaturity that is sustained there is that of like the daddy issues that many of us have, that most of us have. It's those childhood wounds repeating again. Because when we make up stories about why other people have hurt us, or why they left us, or like the reason why they were absent from validating a certain thing that we wanted resolution on and that we wanted clarity on, it repeats the father wound, which is, my dad was emotionally unavailable, so I never got the validation that he actually does love me. And you know what? I was too afraid to ask because I was afraid of what the truth might be. I had a physically in person absentee dad. And so the story that I would tell myself, because I didn't actually have access to him, so I never got a real resolution. The story that I told myself was that he was off doing something else, that whether it was a good something else or a bad something else, it makes me feel better. It makes me feel better to imagine that that's what happened. And if I keep telling myself that, then I feel resolved about it. And it doesn't really matter if I get that validation from my dad about it. It doesn't matter if, the way that the father figure in my life wasn't there for me. It doesn't matter how it happened. The only thing that matters is that I resolved it. That I didn't need to seek communion with that other person. And now I'm talking generally again, not just about daddies. Yeah, daddies. Okay. I didn't need to seek validation from that other person for me to feel good again. So I've talked about a few of the things that perpetuates and the self-betrayal, but I also want to name another kind of betrayal, which is a deeper one. There is the self-betrayal, which is like your thoughts and beliefs about yourself and the emotions that you feel toward yourself that you generate through those thoughts and beliefs about yourself. And then there is also a kind of self-betrayal that is in relation to others. It's a relational betrayal. It's a relational self-betrayal because there is the perpetuation of the oppressive systems that we live under, which tell us to deal with things by ourselves. The daddy wound for you might have been that you were too dramatic and he would laugh in your face and send you to your room so that you could go and cry by yourself. That was my daddy wound. Would laugh in my face when I was crying and I was trying to set boundaries and saying, I don't like that you did that. I don't like you that you keep doing that. And you'd be like, haha, I'm in charge and you're doing too much. So go ahead and deal with all of that in your room by yourself. And then you can come out when you're ready. You can come out when you're calm again. Hi, sweetness. And that kind of relational self-betrayal is perpetuated into adulthood when you decide that you are going to keep that pattern going. That was a pattern that your daddy introduced, or that your parents or your guardians, people who were in charge of you and your emotional maturing in your life, that's what they wanted for you. And you keep perpetuating that cycle, which oppresses and represses your emotional growth and your emotional resilience. So, not only are you betraying yourself by continuing and perpetuating patterns that you don't even like and not validating to see whether or not they're even effective or true, but also you are participating in this kind of relational self-betrayal, which perpetuates those patterns from the past and keeps you from feeling connected to other people. Because push comes to shove, when it comes to community and when it comes to relationships, the only way that you are going to develop real community that you feel safe in, real relationships that you feel nurtured by, the only way that those two things are going to happen, that nurturing and that safety, is if you let other people show up for you. And if you're making the assumption right off the bat that they're going to hurt you, like your daddy wounds keep telling you, then what you're going to do is going to create false stories about them so that you can feel good enough to feel resolved. And then you're going to move on to the next person who's inevitably going to hurt you, because we cannot avoid being hurt. We can't. We cannot. We simply cannot. Even the people who love you the most in the world, even your partner who is with you for life, is going to keep hurting you. They're going to hurt you once and they're going to hurt you again. Those two things are absolute truths in relationships and in community. Community is going to hurt you and then it's going to hurt you again. And the relational self betrayal is in withholding from yourself the community and the relationships that you actually deeply crave, that you actually truly want, that feel like safety and feel like nourishment to you. You are betraying yourself by pushing those things away every time you choose a false story over seeking validation from others, seeking the truth in community, seeking the truth in relationship. I think if I take a spiritual turn here and I talk about how the spiritual community and spiritual gurus show up, especially like spiritual thought leaders and like white people who interpret Buddhism, what we tend to see in our spiritual communities here, because of some of the narratives that get tainted from like very well-meaning and actually like pretty enlightened um, spiritual dogmas. um, what happens is that those spiritual dogmas are taken under the lens and the light of colonization and white supremacy and patriarchy, which are a collection of values that are sustained by individualism, separation from community, and higher mental and logical emphasis than emotional and relational emphasis. So we have no social values within the spiritual realm and within our spiritual communities because the social is not how we have been taught to believe we are going to achieve that enlightenment and that connection and that divine grace that we're all looking for. But the divine grace that we are looking for is within the grace that we give to the people in our lives. The connection that we're seeking from the divine exists in the divine within every person that we meet. The detachment that we are taught is a kind of emotional lifelessness that kills off what true, authentic, honest expressions of community could be. And so, what often happens is because of the um, like heteronormative, patriarchal, white supremacist, colonialist, like very individualistic lens that we've taken on detachment as enlightenment, because of that lens, what we've interpreted is that we should never seek validation from other people. And I can understand because we've been hurt before that sometimes listening to other people's version can be gaslighting. Some people have gaslighted us. Some people have manipulated us. Some people have emotionally abused us. We can tap back into our daddy wounds again or our mommy wounds. Pick a parent. There are wounds there that made us feel lesser than and like we couldn't trust ourselves because they were the authority in the situation. And so now that we're trying to become authorities on ourselves. I'm trying to become so well known to myself that nobody can convince me otherwise, can convince me that I don't know myself, or can convince me what I don't know about myself. When we try to become authorities on ourselves, uh, through that spiritual process of healing through those wounds and escaping the emotional abuse and moving beyond relationships that had mastered the art of manipulation, when we're able to clear those things from our lives and get to a healthy place, that's when we can circle back to seeking validation in community and seeking validation from other people. So you might not be at a stage yet where you feel like that's possible for you, and I totally understand. And this message is for the future self that you are looking forward to, who doesn't feel quite safe or nourished and nurtured in any relationships yet. You might still be on that healing track where you don't know who you can trust. And I, I get it. What I would propose to you is, if that's where you're at, you're still in like the newness of the healing process, I would suggest seeking out community and trying them on like Cinderella slippers, trying to see what fits and what doesn't, because there are going to be people who do start to cultivate safety and nourishment for you, in which you can start to imagine yourself validating some of the things that you believe. And maybe you share an opinion and somebody validates it. And then you share another opinion or another belief and somebody validates it. And that creates that moment for you where you're like, oh, I'm safe enough to be able to come back to this person and say, hey, is this story true? Or the story that I've been telling myself about this situation is, or the story I've been telling myself about that one thing that happened between us is. Eventually, you're going to be able to get to that point if you have somebody in your life, if you have at least one person in your life that you can feel safe enough and have felt nourished enough in relationship with them to be able to get that sense of validation. And then once you know what it feels like, and once you know the dynamics in which you can seek validation, then you should seek validation. I promise you. Seeking validation from other people, as humiliating and embarrassing as it sounds, like sometimes like we create stories in our heads because we're so hurt by the things that other people have said to us, and we're so embarrassed at how our wounded child reacts, and how that wounded child is the one who speaks for us in the moments when we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. What the fuck? Our inner child is the one who bursts forth and says, how dare you? And slams the door. And then we feel embarrassed. We feel humiliated. Like, how am I going to come back from that? And also, how can I approach this person again and say, what is your side of the story? Because already the version of their story that we think we've received hurt us once. But the brave thing that we need to do, if we are to keep community, and if we are to sustain community, and if we are to sustain relationships that have been and are nourishing and nurturing to us, what it is that we need is to embrace discomfort and understand that seeking validation from other people is a way to reinforce the good beliefs that we want to have about other people, the good beliefs that we want to have about community, the good beliefs that we want to have about ourselves. When I started dating my partner, who I've been with 4 years now, I felt really embarrassed to be crying all the time over needing validation, needing to be reminded that that person loves me, needing to be reminded that that person likes me and doesn't think that I'm annoying, needing to be reminded that I can be annoying to my partner and that he will still continue to love me. Needing to be reminded, needing that validation that even when we disagree with each other, we still appreciate and care about each other, that we still respect and trust each other. That's validation that's worth getting. That's validation that's worth asking for and that's worth seeking out. Because once you develop any level of trust with somebody, you need to be able to not just test that trust in terms of like playing games with people and being kind of shady and paranoid about other people proving things to you, but test the relationship in the sense that I think I can come to this person for this thing. Let me see how they respond over and over. I need to keep giving this person opportunities and chances to show me what our trust is built on. And not only to tell me, because validation comes through the sharing of stories, but then also to show me, what happens when two stories merge and form a mutual truth and mutual trust. What happens? We discover our boundaries. We discover new forms within the relationship that are no longer just fluid, amorphous, love, but are concrete and solid and help us to ground that sense of safety and that sense of nourishment that we think that we've found. The way that we can become more certain and we can get more clarity, neurodivergent people who are always seeking certainty and who are always needing clarity before you can have the confidence to make the next move in your life. The way that you can do that is by leaning into that certain uncertainty and that lack of clarity and letting other people fill in the blanks for you once in a while. Because not only do you deserve to have those blanks filled in for you by people who are trying to show up for you and would show up for you if you let them. But also then you're not spinning out on what you're trying to figure out. Is this intuition or is this anxiety? I don't know. The best thing for me to do is to make up a story and then keep it moving. Make up a story that reinforces how I feel and then keep it moving. Because the only data points that I have to work with, the only evidence that I have to work with are mine. When you refuse, when you fool yourself into thinking that you could complete and resolve some kind of conflict, some kind of discomfort that you felt by just convincing yourself that your perspective on it is the only one that mattered anyway, what you're going to continue to do is find that your relationships have a distinct absence of safety and nourishment. Because you can't be nourished by something that is absent. You can't be nourished by an absent other person. You can't feel safe when you keep pushing other people away. And the patterns that you experience in relation with other people who trigger that inner child, who trigger that inner saboteur, who tries to destroy a relationship and tries to like reject other people and abandon other people before they get the chance to reject or abandon you, even if that's not what they were planning on doing. That inner saboteur, that inner wounded child, that inner victim who really thought that the relationship was based on a certain wonderful something. And now that felt like an illusion. It feels like it was an illusion because it shattered. But the victimization comes in with how you pity yourself for believing in something that was mostly true, was only mostly true. We have these positive delusions that help us get through our lives. And if they're uplifting and they help us reach our goals, then the delusions continue to be the solutions. But some of the negative delusions that we have are that, like, one relationship is everything to you, or it must be the same thing with the other person in order for it to be real. Like, it has to be the same in both directions in order for that delusion that you have about the relationship to have been true. It can be true that that person is everything for you, and also that the other person doesn't see it that way, and for you to be able to coexist with those two truths. But that's when the amorphous and that like inner child who doesn't understand boundaries and doesn't understand systems and structures starts to grow up and starts to mature. That's where the emotional maturity happens, is when you bring those disparate truths together and you develop boundaries. You kind of rake lines in the sand and understand the forms and the features of the relationship. Those shapes that always existed but were a little squiggly before and now have a nice roundness to them, a nice solidity to them. I don't know if I made the point that I was going to make earlier. I'm an ADHD person without having had my meds in a few weeks. So, you know, I'm doing the best that I can. Let me know if there's anywhere that I left off and you're like, I was waiting for you to answer or finish this part, because I do that a lot. And I would love to come back in the comments and be like, oh, right, yes. Okay, here's the rest of that train of thought. But ultimately, the way that we fool ourselves, especially as neurodivergent people, into believing that we've found peace on the other side of conflict is often by avoiding the conflict entirely and making up our own theories, our own conspiracy theories on what happened and where did we go wrong or where did they go wrong. And I think this is a great time to consider some of the stories that you have that not been verified, that haven't been validated by another person. I had a story for a long time, which is that which is that when I didn't write an apology letter to my friend's mom 10 years ago for something that I said to her that set her off, that made my friend back up her mother and take her mom's take her mom's side, which, yeah, of course, you take your family's side. um I had the story in my head that she still didn't like me and she was still mad at me and she still wanted nothing to do with me and she still felt like I owed her mom an apology. So 10 years later, and only just a couple days ago, I texted her like a kind of a formal formal letter where I did the whole Dear Andrea part, if this is still your number, and just wrote to her. I've thought about how me not sending that apology letter disrupted what was a great relationship with you. And I wonder if you're still into this, and I wonder how you're doing with this. You're the person who introduced me to this other thing. Are you still into it too? Um, I would love to hear from you if you would like to, give our relationship another go. And I was like, I'm probably never going to hear from her. And the next day, she messaged me back and she was like, this feels like this feels like a fiction novel where I'm you know breaking down, getting overwhelmed in the library because somebody from my past is coming back to like reach their hand out to me. And what we discovered by verifying and validating our sides of the story with each other was that we have new boundaries. We have new ways of showing up in our relationships. We have new ways that we have grown. I mean, 10 years have passed. Ugh, 10 years. But we also find that we have so much in common that gives us even more language to connect about, gives us even more ideas to relate to each other about. And indeed, as 10 years have passed, she and her mother not really on the best terms anymore, actually. So I was right to not send that letter, is the story that I'm telling myself. And I think she would vouch for that too, because it was a very particular situation, and I won't even go into it. But the mom was the bad guy, is all that I'll say. The bad guy, if we need to frame it that way. And I even found within this relationship, and with talking with her about how like we both have self-diagnosed as ADHD, and the autistic in us feels this way and the ADHD person feels this way, we've discovered that like the other part of like our Venn diagram overlap is that the autistics in us need need to not have everything be considered intuitive, need to not have everything be assumed as intuitive or assumed as something that anybody could figure out. Because what we've realized is we need things to be explicit. We need to not have like the washing machine cycle with that one sock in there that's like killing us. That's just this story or this belief that's just cycling in our minds over and over and over again and driving us crazy with anxiety. We need for that not to be eased by our own addition of whatever our intuition tells us, because things can get jumbled. And then that's when we start creating stories. And those stories can be false. Those stories can be ways that we fool ourselves into thinking that we've nailed it. We've reached resolution and we can move on with our lives. And the good things that we've had can continue to expire whenever harm happens, because new good things will pop up eventually. But woe is me, people keep hurting me. Instead, what we realized is that our autistic level of need for directness and for people to approach us and tell us, I am angry with you and it's about this thing, instead of leaving us in the dark, or the rejection sensitivity dysphoria that we have telling us everybody's mad at me, or they're angry at me and I don't know what about, because they're treating me a certain way and I know it, like my intuition is telling me that I know it, but my intuition can't tell me what it's about. My intuition can't tell me what that person's mad at me about. The fuck? I'm an energy reader by the way that my intuition tells me that something's off, but I'm not a mind reader in the sense that I'm going to go and poke and prod into somebody else's stories and pull out the ones that are relevant to me. That's a bit much to assume of anybody, autistic or not, neurodivergent or not. And what we have sort of reveled in becoming acquainted with each other again is that we've found it better to assume that people aren't mad at us until they tell us otherwise, and assume that we don't need to make up stories on other people's behalf to explain things that we don't understand or explain vibes that are off, when all we have to do as adults who are maturing emotionally every day and all the time through the effort of discomfort and being uncomfortable on purpose, what we can do is we can ask. We can seek verification of the stories and the energies that we're feeling. And we can move to validate some of the beliefs and some of the the parts of the stories that we have evidence for, so that the other parts that are unclear get to be made whole and get to be actually resolved, not just imagined to be resolved or assumed to be resolved because we've done so much mental work alone by ourselves, again, with the white supremacist and patriarchal nature of doing things by yourself and logic being superior, and uh like your own investment in your well-being being the number one truth. Because ultimately, if you have people who actually think of you as a friend, that's not going to be real. That's not real life. You are not the only one who cares about you and your well-being. You are not the only one who is going to move to protect and safeguard you from hurt and harm. And the people who love and care about you are going to hurt and cause discomfort, but they are still always, even if their intention is to share something that is uncomfortable, that they think you have capacity for, or that they hope you are open to trying to understand, even if they share something that's uncomfortable with you, in their intentions, they're intending to give you a chance and you an opportunity to complete a story that they've been telling about themselves. Maybe one that they've been self-betraying about. And so, in lieu of interpreting that as harm or interpreting that as a friendship betrayal, I'm like, what is creating the yellow glow here? Oh, okay. The scuba mask outside. um, in lieu of interpreting people who care about you hurting you as true harm, I urge you to witness with compassion the self-betrayal that they might have been going through before they shared that with you, and for you to let go of the false stories that you might try to tell yourself about that level of disparity between how you see the world and how they seem to see the world. Because I guarantee you, when that person who loves you and has created safety and nurturing and nourishment in relationship with you shared or hurt you in that way, they had every intention to safeguard you from harm. And true harm is gaslighting. True harm is manipulation. True harm is emotional abuse, telling you not to feel how you really feel or to feel less. But causing discomfort is letting you know I have boundaries and you might be making assumptions about me, or you might be taking something personally that's not about you. And I don't want you to see it as a you problem. I want you to understand that it's a me problem within the context of our relationship. So it inevitably affects you. But that doesn't mean that you have to take it on. There are so many ways that we self betray by creating false stories about ourselves and about other people based on the whole like impact versus intention thing. Like your intentions are good, but your impact was poor and was damaging. Because of that, we often fail to establish connections with other people that give them a chance to test the trust that has already been built. And like I said, not test in like a paranoid gamification kind of way, but in like a sovereign kind of way. Like I'm taking ownership of this trust and I'm passing it back to you. I'm holding it out in my hands for you to take. And that's a choice that I'm making, to be vulnerable and uncomfortable, to have the capacity that I need to for the discomfort that emotional maturity takes. I think neurodivergent people, and especially our autistic people, our highly autistic people, our high functioning autistic people, I think we're being called to higher levels of emotional maturity. And I think it's through no longer self betraying or fooling yourself into believing in certain false stories or going to the depths of the earth to ground yourself in stories just because they make you feel good and they make you feel resolved. When there are people out there who love you and care about you and want to be a part of the the upheaval that you're going through. Because every conflict, every confrontation is an opportunity for growth and an opportunity for the upheaval of beliefs that you've had that aren't helping you anymore, that are actually limiting the amount of connection that you can feel with others. And the people who care about you care about how much they get to connect with you and how deeply they get to connect with you. But if you're so deep in your own false stories, in your own made up narratives about what's going on or what happened, past tense, then you don't get to have stories like the ones with my friend Andrea, where I was like, you know what? I'm going to let her tell me what the truth is, what her truth is. And then I'm going to piece things together and see what comes out of this, what new shapes and forms, what new lines in the sand are drawn so that we can maybe have a relationship again. Because there was love there. But now there needs to be respect and kindness and honesty. And the only way that that can happen is if we let go of the false narratives, if we let go of self betraying on purpose to hurt others before we get hurt, or to hurt ourselves so deeply in the process of trying to recover from what somebody said to us or did to us, that we convince ourselves that we can never come back from that. The kindest thing that we can do is to not believe that other people are just being nice to us, which is a way to which is very transactional. You know, it's very polite and political and sterile to just be nice. When people are kind to us, they give us an opportunity and they give us a chance to love them more deeply in spite of the discomfort that it's going to cause, and in spite of the hurt that they are inevitably going to cause us, and that you are inevitably going to cause them. Because if you let go of self betrayal and you continue on in relationships that you thought you couldn't continue in, then what you are going to do is you are going to realize, oh, my friend had the bravery and the audacity. My family member had the bravery and the audacity. My partner had the bravery and the audacity. My coworker had the bravery and the audacity to be real with me at a time when they didn't have to. They could have just been nice. And now I get to have that same bravery and audacity and figure out what it means to me and why it would mean so much to me. It's 3:33 on the clock right now. Essentially figure out, how am I going to use my bravery and audacity to no longer self-betray anymore? Because wow, that took courage for them to not self-betray and not pretend that everything was okay, or not pretend that they didn't have boundaries. Wow, so courageous of them. Maybe I can try that too. And it might hurt them when they hear it, but I know that they already trusted me and they already gave me that chance. Now it's my turn. Let me know how this sits with you. Let me know which part of this message resonated and what you really needed to hear today or this week, with whatever you have going on in your life. I would love to hear where you're at. I love you so much. You're deserving of all the love you desire, and that takes place in some of the resources that I have in the caption below. So whether that's a one-on-one card reading with me, or that's some of the Getting Unstuck resources that I have on my Patreon, um, it's there. It's there for you to dive into and to love on yourself more. I love you so much. You're deserving of all the love you desire, and I hope you have a beautiful, wonderful rest of your day. Mwah.